Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bread of Life channel. I'm here with Taylor, and Taylor's going to talk about his experience and his beliefs. And we don't really know where this conversation is going to go. I mean, I don't. Maybe he does. But I think it's going to be great. And we've just been getting to know each other a little bit in the last few minutes. And so I'm excited about talking. Taylor has music that he just put out this year. Look at the link in the description and check out his music. So yeah, that's exciting. Tell me, when did you start writing music?
I've been in bands for like a really long time now. At the beginning of the pandemic, I wanted to take singing lessons. I was like, what better time than now? And then my therapist told me to write some songs, and that's how it ended up. So I'm pretty excited about all of that. Thank you for when you sent me the email and you were like, I'm listening to your songs. I was like, oh my gosh, thank you.
Yeah. And I had a chance to listen to a few of them. I mean, how many songs do you have?
I just have the 3 singles.
3. Okay, then I listened to all of them. Yeah, and I watched the videos that go with them. So the videos are very creative. Now the music is a little bit angsty.
Okay.
I felt angst. Is that like, do you feel that way when you're expressing your music?
Yeah.
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 Okay. Yeah. So welcome to those who are with us. Jesus Wizard Spatula. Glad you're here. Dharma Defender. Really glad you're here. Hi, Bob. Hi, Dave M. And so let me just say right now, we're going to announce the Atheist of the Month. Dave M was the Atheist of the Month for last month. Dave, you're not on the wall anymore, but thank you for being a great Atheist of the Month. You've actually been just as faithful this month, and so I'm thankful for that. So I'm going to announce the Atheist of the Month, and that would be Dharma Defender. So I'm so glad you're here. And if you want me to put your real name instead of I wasn't sure if you wanted me to put your YouTube name or your real name, but you are the Atheist of the Month. And thank you so much. And I just want to read what I wrote. Thanks for your consistent participation in live streams, supportive comments, and for taking the time to consider a perspective different than your own. Thanks for supporting the Bread of Life channel. I really appreciate you. And I've loved your comments this month. And my favorite comment that you made was when there was like a Christian in the chat, and the Christian was kind of like being a little saucy, and you were like, hey, this is the atheist church. Like, this is an atheist channel. Get out of here. But anyway, of course, all are welcome here. Christians, you are very welcome here. But I was really touched by that comment, and you have been so faithful. So thank you so much. And so you're on the wall. And if you, I have $50 gift card for you. Just send me an email and I'll be happy to send that to you. If I don't think I have your email. So please do send me an email so I can send that to you. And so with that, let's go on and hear from Taylor.
Man, I think it's so cool that you were saying that you're de facto atheist YouTube channel now. That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting to me too. It's something unexpected. It's not what I would have expected. But of course, like the whole reason that I started my channel is to help people know about Jesus. So, I mean, I don't, if Christians watch it, I'm happy, but who am I trying to reach? I'm trying to reach the people who don't believe. And it means a lot to me that people are willing to come and listen to my perspective, and so thank you guys for doing that. And of course, I want to hear your perspectives too, which is why we are hearing from Taylor.
Well, I think reaching Christians is also a good thing that could come as a result of this, because I think a lot of, not just Christians, I think everybody tends to do this, is we stay in our bubble and we like don't expose ourselves to other beliefs. And I don't know. I always admire when people are not afraid to challenge what they think about the world and stuff. I know that I was gonna kind of share my story with you and see what you thought about it, but I'm curious about your story, like kind of how you came to the beliefs that you currently hold. I don't know what all of those are, but
Okay.
your testimony, if you will.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a pretty standard Christian. Well, I don't know if I would call myself standard Christian. Maybe, I'd just say I'm a Christian.
Okay.
And a kind of a theological mutt. How did I become that? Well, I'll give you the short version because I want to hear more from you. But I was raised in a Christian home. I was also a pastor's kid, like you were. I believed at a young age, I believed in Jesus. As I got to be a little bit older, I would say, teenager, I really started questioning my beliefs. There were quite a few years when I really wasn't sure what I believed, especially I had a lot of problems with the Bible. So I really wrestled with the Bible. But I want to say I wrestled with the Bible, but honestly, I was probably just more doing what I wanted to do, and not really, and kind of like putting spirituality to, on the side. But when I did think about it, I had issues with the Bible. I had issues with the way God, acted in the Old Testament. I had, just different things that bothered me. And so I really wasn't sure what I believed. I had problems with like thinking about other religions and, how do we know who's right? And then is this so exclusive? And that's actually a huge part of my testimony is my experience with Muslims. But, and that's thinking about Muslims is something that started when I was a little girl. And so I kind of said, God, when you answer all my questions, then I will, follow you. And but as time went on, I really didn't get my questions answered. And so long story short, when I was age 23, I really encountered some people that their testimony and faith really spoke to me. And one of them was my own brother. And so I started pursuing God, and I pursued him this way. I said, God, I want to believe, and I want to believe that the Bible's true, but can you show me? And I really then started pursuing answers and reading the Bible. And then about a year after that, I had a very profound experience with God that was, life-changing, I would say. So here I am. Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, no, I've been genuinely curious like the whole time that we've been kind of planning for this. Yeah, so it's good to,
Cool.
And I guess part of the reason that I wanted to see like if we had similar stories up until like maybe a certain point, and my suspicion was I think was correct.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about your story.
Yeah. So, my dad, who's a pastor now, went to prison when I was a kid, and he, at some point in prison, I think a lot of people tend to do this, they find Jesus while in prison, and he got out, and he was like full blown Christian. I don't think he became a pastor until I was in like high school, but he was very into it. And when I was very young, I was like 7, he sat me down one day when I got to visit him on the weekends and stuff. And he said, son, this is the Bible, God's word, and this is the book of Revelation. And he gave me a very like literal, picturesque prediction of future events that were depicted in the book of Revelation. And, if you don't do what God says, then there's this eternal hellfire, choking, crying, screaming, the George Carlin bit. And like that just did so much damage to me as a child. And kind of over time throughout my adolescence, I was in private Christian education. My grandparents didn't want me to go to the public school that I was zoned to go to. So they enrolled me in a private Christian school. And my dad would still pick me up on Sundays. We'd go to church. And I think throughout all of that time, those pictures of hell and the judgment of God and the wrath, and it was all just kind of reinforced and kind of drilled into me. And so there was a lot of fear, right? Like all of my ideas about the concept of God and like what this particular religion was just fear, 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 fear. Mm-hmm. And there were lots of times where I would wake up from a nightmare, or like right before I would go to sleep, I like didn't want to have a nightmare. Or during the day, I would get these random like fits of anxiety and I didn't know where they came from. Or little things would trigger it too. I remember when I was in like 5th grade, they did this little ceremony where there was supposed to be, so, you know that instrument, it's like a ram's horn, and it makes that really loud, like really scary type siren sound. You know what I'm talking about?
I think so. Is it the really big one? Okay, yeah, I cannot remember the name of that right now, but yes,
maybe someone in the live stream chat will know. But
yeah,
there was they had chapel services during schools, Wednesday afternoons. It was like basically a church service, and they would come in and they would like blow this big instrument that was like, this is the sound that's gonna happen when God returns. And so like I remember I was on the phone with a friend at like 1 p.m. on a Saturday, and a trumpet played on the TV, and I was just thrown into just like a fit of anxiety and terror. So like that's just kind of an example of like the way it was. And I remember praying when I would wake up from the nightmares before I'd go to bed, when I would have these random, hits of just fear. And I remember praying, and it was kind of similar to what you described, right? Where like, just show me something, right? Like I was terrified of God himself, and I never prayed for, to win the next basketball game, or to hit puberty like all the other kids, or to get a girlfriend. It was like, I literally just want some of that, everyone talks about their personal experiences. Just give me a sip of that personal experience juice. That's all I want. I just want to know that you're there, and that I don't have to be afraid of you. And I think this is where our stories kind of take different paths, is I never got it at all, like not even a hint of it. And I was very impressionable. I still am. I think a lot of atheists, they're very scientifical minded. I'm really not, and I'm gullible. So if there was a God who, through personal experience wanted to show me, it's like, I would probably believe. But I never did. And I think it's damning when a religious person uses their personal experience as a way to kind of defend their belief systems, because I do the same thing, but I come to a completely different conclusion. So I guess fast forward a few years, I was in therapy, and I was really depressed over this girl that had dumped me. And my therapist pointed something out to me. He was like, every problem you have, it somehow makes its way back to like death and dying and the end of the world. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. And that kind of planted in my head a little bit for a few years. Then fast forward to March 2020, COVID. I remember having a borderline nervous breakdown while at work, because everything is shutting down. And I just remember thinking, like, is this what was talked about in Revelation, where all of these things are happening, and this is when Jesus is supposed to come back and take all the evildoers to the bad place? And I remember posting on a subreddit. There's a subreddit I follow called X-Christian. And I was like, I know that we don't believe this stuff anymore, but does anyone get kind of like weirded out whenever these signs start to show up? And I posted the same thing on Facebook. And I got 2 messages that I remember very distinctly. One of them was from someone who calls themselves a Christian on the internet, but when you're around them, you're like, Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you know what that word means.
Yeah.
And his message was just let go, just have faith, trust God, and you'll be okay. And I was like, thanks. That does absolutely nothing for me right now. And then someone on Reddit reached out to me, and I'm guessing they were an ex-Christian, atheist, some kind of something. And they sent me an article, and it was about how the book of Revelation can be interpreted as, or maybe not can be interpreted as, but was meant to be a love letter to the Christians in Rome who were being persecuted. As kind of a way to like not feel as though everything was hopeless. And so after reading that and kind of settling into, okay, this isn't what I thought it was, namely the book of Revelation, then like, what else can be interpreted differently? You know, maybe there's, I don't have the correct answer. Maybe there isn't a correct interpretation, but like, if there are other ways, then what else have I been taught that was wrong? And so, yeah, from there, you know, you just go down the rabbit hole, but I think it usually comes back to the personal experience. You know, people cannot reason themselves in and out of positions they didn't reason themselves in and out to. I'd said that wrong, but I think you know what I mean. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And thank you for letting me talk for so long. I feel like I talked forever.
No, you've hardly been talking at all. So yeah, this is, I have heard this from a lot of people that they were really, you know, those images of hell and things were drilled into them. And I guess I never experienced that. Like my parents, you know, I don't ever remember them mentioning hell, you know, as part of our Christianity. Even, you know, my dad was the pastor. I don't remember him ever mentioning hell. And so I think there is, you know, a difference in probably what we experienced because I never experienced that fear.
Yeah. Do they believe in hell?
Yeah, both my parents do, but I think actually they, well, you know, I think my mom has kind of changed her perspective since she saw my videos on the topic. Did you see my videos on the topic?
I did watch, I think the last one you posted.
Okay. Yeah. So, you know, like, but my parents were focused on hell. So it wasn't like something they wanted us to be afraid of or anything like that. So we were more focused on the positive side of salvation. And so I don't remember them mentioning it. In fact, I actually can't even tell you if my dad believed in hell as eternal conscious torment, because I don't remember him ever talking about it.
How do you think things would be different for you if you maybe had gotten some of that those teachings?
Oh, I'm sure that it would be very different for me, especially if I received that teaching at a young age and I was really afraid. Because I can tell you, it was actually when I started reading the Bible as an adult that hell started bothering me, right? Like it was after, like, you know, I started really being a serious Christian and, you know, had faith in Jesus. It was at that time when I was really reading the Bible, you know, every time I would see hell, I would just be like, you know, and so I hated that idea, you know? And so I actually back at that time, I mean, I was like, no, there has to be something wrong with this. Like, it can't be right, you know? And I would just like, at that time, there was nothing available on the internet. It wasn't like, you know, you could get the kind of information that I have now, because it just was not available. That was, you know, back in 2000 to 2003, I'd say there was nothing available like that, you know, is available now. Now you can go look at all the manuscripts, you can look at everything. And so all I had really was my Bible and whatever commentaries or, you know, whatever I could find at the Christian bookstore, which was all confirming this eternal conscious torment. And so that was, and, you know, unless you had access to a giant theological library or something, that was all you were going to get. So hell bothered me for a long time. And in fact, I mean, I would say I was for 10 years as a Christian, I was afraid of God's rejection. Like I became afraid of God's rejection. So I told you the short version of the story, but you know, coming to know God and realizing that Jesus is the truth, that's only the beginning of the journey. You know, I've been through a lot with God in the last 20 years. And one of the things I went through was this long period of fear of being rejected by God. And I mean, I remember my husband, you know, he would come home and I'd be laying in bed with my covers up to my face and he'd be like, "What's wrong?" And I'd be like, "I'm afraid God's going to reject me in the end." And he'd be like, "What? This is ridiculous. Get out the Bible." And he would, you know, pull out and he'd start reading the Bible. He'd always go to Romans chapter 5 and we'd always read Romans 5-8. And then I'd be like, "Okay." You know, and so anyway, but this was a long struggle and now I'm talking too much. So, but
No.
I will not, I'll tell the end of that story. I mean, tell the rest of the story some other time. But I mean, I'm just trying to illustrate, even as an adult, hell was a problem for me. And so I can see how that fear and everything would, you know, be so much more terrible if you were a child believing that.
Yeah, I think like that whole mess, it's leaked into my adult life. You know, that fear of, and the way that you described just then, I never thought about this before, but you know, being afraid of being rejected by God. I felt like the actual, like, no, I didn't just feel afraid of being rejected. I did get rejected by God in my eyes, right? Because I reached out, right? And I truly, humbly, like, begged, pleaded as a young person. My brain wasn't even fully developed. And, you know, I'm reaching my hand out and getting nothing in return. So I think like that whole thing has seeped its way into my adult life, where I have trouble with intimacy and building long-lasting, trusting relationships, because the supreme love of the creator of the universe, I wanted it and I sought it, and I have nothing to show for that. And I think whenever I start to think about, you know, the reasons that I don't believe, because I've been asked that question a couple of times, and, you know, you have your typical divine hiddenness, problem of evil type stuff. I think for me, like, those two things meet in like a really interesting way for my personal experience, which is a form of divine hiddenness that I find to be evil. Right?
Mm.
Does that make sense? You see where I'm going with that? Where God knows that I wouldn't have control over how the concept of God was introduced to me. He knew that I would have all of these like images in my head over the years, and these messages that were being taught about how sickening I was to God, and how I was worth less than the dirt, and I'm an abomination unto God if I have these thoughts that I can't control in my head. They just go, and I'm a kid, right? My brain's not even developed enough for me to cognitionate in a different way. And so knowing all of that, still being rejected, or being denied rather, the personal experience, it makes those two concepts, the divine hiddenness, the problem of evil, it makes those meet. And I don't know. I'm just curious what you think about just like how that whole thing intersects.
Yeah. Well, you know, I am thankful for my experience with God. I did give you the shortened version. I believed it before I had the experience. And I believed it for quite a while before I had an experience. And I don't think God has promised anyone a particular experience. There's people that I'm jealous of their experience. You know, my friend Mary, Jesus appeared to her when she was 45 years old. She was not a believer. Okay. She was not a Christian. She did not believe. Jesus appeared to her like sometime when she was in her 40s. like physically appeared to her, and it changed her life. I've never had that experience with Jesus. I want to see Jesus. Why don't I get to see Jesus? Why don't I get to see angels? Why don't I get to see, and have some of the experiences that other people experience? So I think God has different ways of working with everyone. And just because you haven't had an experience yet doesn't mean that you won't. And I mean, is it possible that God might not have wanted to confirm to you all those bad things that you were believing? I mean, like it sounds like you were on a really bad foundation of who God is, because you were on this foundation of God is someone to be frightened of. And, God is just this awful, scary being that's about to torture people. So like, is that a good image to have confirmed? Like, if you had an experience, then, I mean, is it possible that that would have been a bad thing?
And I know that God is not a vending machine. I can't make God do a trick, right? But like,
yeah,
I would ask for a deconfirmation of what I was taught. Like, I would say, like, God, you have this heavenly mansion built for me, or whatever the scriptures say about that. Can I just like get some sort of clarity, or just like demystify this whole thing for me? And like, he could do it. And I was very young. I was very impressionable. It wouldn't have taken much. I remember watching, you remember the Left Behind series?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There was a scene where this guy was like, the world is ending or whatever. And he's like, your God needs to send me a sign. He'll knock that glass over. And then one of the guys he's talking to gets up and he knocks the table on accident. And then the glass falls over. It's like a sign, right? I would have seen something like that and been like, oh, okay, that was God. Now I get it. But nothing that I observed led me to that conclusion. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, a confirmation of what I already believed. If I had an experience that I thought was a confirmation of what I already believed, I think I would be maybe even worse off than I am right now, probably in your eyes, as far as my beliefs. Yeah.
Yeah. But I definitely, I feel your pain. I mean, I would, that's a difficult thing to ask God and feel like God didn't answer. So I don't have a good answer for you.
Yeah. I kind of have come to the conclusion, like, the what's more likely question, that there's an all-loving, all-powerful God who wants a relationship with me and says, ask and you shall receive, or that, at least that version of God maybe isn't there. That's kind of where I see that going.
Yeah, that's really understandable. I can imagine that I might feel the same way if I was in your position.
Yeah.
But I do believe God loves you. I don't believe that you've been rejected. And I think there's a lot of people that haven't had an experience, and yet they do believe. And so
I've heard the same thing. I have a friend that has told me, like, your testimony is going to be crazy whenever God reveals himself to you. And I was like, yeah, okay. So, like, I guess a question came into my mind, like, right now, would you consider me a rational non-believer?
Yeah.
So if I were to die, I'm knocking on some wood here. If I were to die tomorrow, what do you estimate would be the end result?
Well, I'm not God and I can't judge, but since I know God and I know he is more loving than I am, And I would, if I were God, I would bring you into my kingdom and make everything right.
Mm-hmm.
I have confidence that God would do the same thing.
What gives you that confidence?
Well, like you said, the Bible says, ask and you'll receive. And I think you've asked to be part of God's kingdom, right? You've asked to know him. You've asked to be part of his kingdom. So I believe he'll answer that.
Does the pronouns, or that's not a pronoun, whatever part of the sentence that is, do the views that I espouse now, like I don't know if you got a chance to look at my TikTok, like I go in there and I just rant about
No, I haven't.
why I don't believe in God and why I think the whole thing is a farce and it's silly. I help run a support group for people that have had really bad experiences with religion. My views right now are like kind of anti-God. I guess like I would consider myself an anti-theist, right? So like, is it, I don't know which kind of view of this that you hold, like if someone can lose their salvation or not. Or if I really ever had it. I don't know that I ever actually bought in. I wanted to. And I would say that when I would pray, like, I want to believe, but I just don't right now. I'm scared of the concept, but I don't know if I believe. So if I was saved, which I don't even know, if someone just asks, but they don't really believe, does that count as being saved? And then, yeah, if I was saved, am I now?
Well,
the question makes sense.
Yeah, it does. What were the ideas that you had about Jesus?
I mean, essentially the same. I was taught that God and Jesus were 1 in 3, or well, two out of 3. So I thought it was kind of the same guy.
And what did you understand about salvation? What is salvation?
Yeah, salvation to me now or then?
Then.
There's a bad place, and I don't want to go to the bad place. My thought patterns would usually lead me to the question of, why is there a bad place at all? And that could be that you could boil that down to people got their theology wrong and it caused psychological harm, child abuse, if you ask me, to me. And like, okay, maybe that's true, but I did ask for clarification that I did not receive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, did you have an understanding of like what it meant that Jesus came to save us? And
I think you cut out for a second.
Oh, did you have an understanding of what it meant that Jesus became man, lived as one of us, served us to the extent that he was willing to be tortured and killed for us, and then his invitation of salvation?
Vaguely, yeah. I think the way that our brains are kind of wired is like we focus on the negative, because the negative is what's going to prevent us from surviving. And I think my very young, impressionable brain was prone to that same mechanism. It's interesting. I was dating this girl for a little bit, and she baked cakes. That was like her thing. And she was telling me how to bake a cake. And I promise this goes somewhere. She's telling me how to bake a cake, and she told me, you got to caramelize it. Some people will tell you don't got to caramelize it, or she said something. I don't remember exactly what it was. I was only half listening. But so she told me that I have to caramelize a cake. So I thought about that for a little bit, and I was like, if I were to ever go in and bake a cake, and I was with one of those non-caramelizing people, they'd be like, you're about to caramelize it. No. But I would say no, we have to caramelize it, because that's the first thing that I learned. And I
Mm-hmm.
think people kind of think that way. Like, whatever that first thing I learned, that's probably the right way, because the people that I trust to inform me about the world, your mom and dad, you're the adult, you know better. That's what kids are told. Of course, I don't tell any kids, we were talking about my work earlier. I don't tell any of the kids that I work with, listen to the adults all the time, because they're right. Because adults are wrong a lot. And so that's kind of, I apply that same line of thinking to the hell versus the salvation versus the fluffy love stuff. I was, against my will, led to believe in this very violent, incorrigible, abhorrent version of a belief in a Jesus, a God, that kind of trumps the fluffy love stuff.
Yeah. Yep. Well, God hasn't promised anyone an experience, but what God did is he came and experienced what it was like to live as a human. And, Jesus is the sign. Jesus is, and a lot of people don't have an experience, but they read about what Jesus did, who he was, how he lived, and, his love, his compassion for people, that he went around healing the sick. And when we look around at the world is an absolute mess, right? I mean, even people who, are trying to do good are not always good, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got, people doing horrible things to each other now and throughout history. Well, this is what Jesus came to save us from. Okay. He came to save us and this world from the mess that we have made. So, if anyone is looking for a sign, it is Jesus Christ on the cross, crucified, submitted himself. He became your servant, Taylor. Like, God didn't just give you a good feeling. Okay. Like, to me, that this God give you a good feeling. Okay. That's great. But what
Which
God,
I didn't even get that.
I know. But what I'm saying is he already did something much greater than that. He already came in the flesh and he served you by submitting himself into the hands of evil people who tortured him and killed him. And he shared in our destiny of death so that we could share in his destiny. His destiny is eternal life. And so now he is freely offering eternal life to the entire world.
When and I'm gonna, you know that I'm gonna push back.
Go for it. That's fine.
When the idea of salvation is cited as like a freely given gift,
Yeah,
I don't see it that way, because I have to believe it in order to acquire it, I think, is what you might say.
Well, I think that's the way to be sure that you've received it. Like, if you want to be sure you've received it, put your trust in Jesus. But I think Jesus' salvation is much more powerful than people give it credit for. I don't think it is based on, what you like necessarily, people's information about it, right? Because, okay, Adam, okay, let me explain. Adam and Eve sinned and they kind of messed it up for all of us. Okay. So sin has been in the world since then. Okay. And because of that, death. Now I'm going to die. Even if I grew up in a place where I never heard of Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. Okay. I've never heard about Adam and Eve, but I'm still going to be affected by their sin and I'm going to die because of the sin that's in the world and the death, even if I've never heard the story. And
Can I ask
so,
a clarifying question really
yeah.
So the Adam and Eve story, do you interpret that as a literal event that happened?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, continue.
Yeah. So, but I'm not saying that's the only way to interpret it. There's lots of great Christians who think of it in a different way, and that's fine. But what I'm saying is, if Adam and Eve sin, if I don't have to know about that to be affected by it, and the Bible says that Jesus's salvation is more powerful. Jesus's obedience, active obedience on the cross, and what he did for us is more powerful than Adam and Eve's sin. So for it to be more powerful, it has to be more effective. And so to be more effective, it has to be able to affect and bring life to people, even if they haven't heard it.
In order for it to be effective, it has to affect. What do you think that says about, like, when I've described reaching out and not being affected?
Yeah, well, like I said, if you have asked for salvation, you've received it. Whether you feel anything or not. If you have said, look, okay, maybe at that time you were asking for salvation from, this horrible place that, so maybe it was something else that you were asking for salvation from.
Yeah.
But if you're asking for salvation from sin and death, then you have received it, whether or not you feel anything. And that's how good God is. I mean, I don't think he would take it back. And I think he knows exactly where you're at right now. And when I hear you say you're an anti-theist, you know what? I can understand why. I might be an anti-theist too if I was drilled with those, scary ideas as a child and lived under that fear.
So you fall on the side of the coin that someone can't lose their salvation.
Well, I don't want to say it that strongly because there's a few verses in the Bible that talk about kind of what I would call being an apostate, like where it's talked about, like, if you leave the faith, okay? And it kind of alludes to, hey, but they're very non-specific. One of them is in Hebrews chapter 6, and it says, those who have tasted the heavenly gift and those who have experienced the power of the age to come and all this stuff, if they were to turn away, it would be impossible for them to be brought back to repentance. But then it ends with, but we believe in better things for you. Okay, so there's no actual citing of this happening to someone. But I would say, so in general, I operate as if you can't lose it. So, but I don't want to say it very strongly. I'm just saying, I believe in the power of God and the power of Jesus Christ to overcome all the things that come against us in this world. And one of those things is, deception, the powers of darkness trying to deceive us and take us away and deceive us about the love of God and make us think that God is evil. And so I think Jesus is more powerful than those ideas. His salvation is beyond his salvation. He conquered those powers of darkness. He conquered all of that stuff. So I don't believe that the power of those ideas is enough to take you away from the Lord.
You said a moment ago that, correct me if I misremembered, that the power of Jesus can, like, overcome all of the things that the world kind of throws at us, right?
Yeah.
If I were to ask you to paint me a picture of what that overcoming would look like, right? Because, and the reason that I'm asking this question is, and I know you've heard Pine Creek talk about this too, but in my life, my life has gotten better since I've relinquished the idea of a God, not even just like this
Yeah.
Christian God who's very vengeful and hateful, just a God in general, right? Like people talk about, well, you know, if there's no objective source of morality, then everything is permitted and who cares, right? Like I found so much more meaning and value in like my own existence as a non-believer. So if I don't need the belief, what do I have to overcome? Right? Because I don't see like the concept of sin, for example. In my life, I had a conversation with an old friend who's like, you know, well, you're caught in your sin and that's why you can't see all this stuff. And I asked him, what is my sin? What sin am I so caught up in? Because, you know, I'm kind of different than a lot of atheist liberal dudes, right? Like I don't drink. I don't smoke. Never have, never will. I am anti-pornography. I mean, I don't know what other sins people usually will get caught up in. Those are kind of like the big ones, I think. And then I guess like I denied God as my savior because I am convinced that I'm a rational non-believer. I don't know. So my question, back to my question is like, what does that overcoming look like?
Look like for you?
I mean, maybe in general, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you know, I would say right now it may not be much, you know, maybe right now it's not anything, but you never know what this life is going to bring to you. And so you're not right now. It looks like you have a pretty good life, and, you know, things can go seriously wrong, and they are going seriously wrong for a lot of people. And then of course, death.
Yeah.
So, I want to just say that it sounds like you've made the step in a right direction. And it sounds, even though it might sound strange to hear me say this, but it sounds like you're actually closer to God now than you were back then.
How's that?
Because, you know, God is the creator of life. He's the creator of beauty. He's the creator of love. He created you to experience the types of things that you're experiencing now, right? He didn't create you to live in this fearful state. And so right now, what you're experiencing like freedom, joy, the pleasures of life that are good. You know, you're avoiding things that are actually sinful and destructive toward you. You're experiencing the beauty of life. And that is what God created us for. So it sounds to me like you've come closer to God.
It's so interesting. I feel, because the way that I process it is, the further that I remove myself from that idea, the better I behave, the better that I think about myself and other people. The more beauty I see in the world, the more at peace I am with the thought of dying, which is something that I never thought I would say. Like if you told little 15-year-old me that 27-year-old me can say, yeah, like if I don't want to die, but okay, if it's my time, it's my time. I would have thought you were on drugs.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. That's so interesting that it seems to you the opposite.
Well, I mean, you need to get rid of the unhealthy ideas. So I totally, if right now it's helping you not to think about God, and it's helping you to experience love and beauty and to experience the fullness of life and human experience, and like, it sounds like you're on the right track. I wouldn't recommend anything else.
Even though I, as far as I can tell, am experiencing those things independent of God or the concept of God.
Well, you're not experiencing them independent of God, because he's the creator and sustainer of all things. He's actually the source of all the goodness that you're experiencing. He's the source of pleasure. He's the source of joy. He's the source of love. So whenever you are experiencing love, you're experiencing God.
If all of the aforementioned things are true.
Right, of course.
Right.
But you're talking to me. I'm presupposing it's true. But what I'm saying is, so you're not experiencing anything independent of God. You're just experiencing it independent of a wrong idea that you have about God.
That's interesting. I mean, if that's the way that he's trying to make his move, if he's going to slide in the DMs that way, then I respect the hustle. Like that's a decent strategy. I'm not sure, because even like the thought of eternal life, the promise of, eternal happy ever after in heaven, like that idea even, it's like whatever to me. It's kind of like a plate of spaghetti. When I'm eating a plate of spaghetti, I don't think, wow, this spaghetti is useless because it's gonna run out one day and I'm not gonna have it forever. So what does this even matter? It's like, wow, I have spaghetti on my plate right now. Like when I finish this meal, it's gonna mean so much that I sat there and made this and salted it and got the meatballs together. I feel like that's a more enriching way to live.
Yeah.
So I feel like if the best thing that can be offered to me by belief in a God isn't appealing to me, then what do I have to look forward to by belief in a God? Do you know what I mean? If it isn't going to make my life here on earth better, I think there are some scriptures that say it's going to make your life worse. And then I'm not persuaded by, set aside the arguments, like granted it's all true, the concept of eternal life doesn't excite me. It kind of just gives me a feeling of like anxiety, like just thinking about the concept of forever. Just my brain can't even do that.
I've heard people say that. I've even heard Christians say that, that it freaks them out to think about eternal life. That's just it. So I understand that. Well, I do think knowing God it's a blessing to my life. So I do think it changes your life. I think it is beneficial to your life if you are on the right track with God. But there's some people who would be better off if they got rid of some of their bad ideas about God. And if that means getting rid of their concept of God altogether, maybe that's the best way. I know people are Christians. Any Christians watching this are going to probably be really mad at me for saying that. But guys, I am a believer. I'm a Christian. I believe people should know Jesus. So don't freak out. But yeah,
if you, because you said the getting on the right track if you're getting on the right track. And earlier you talked about how, not everyone gets the experience. Not everyone can feel the salvation in their life. Maybe if I can phrase that an alternative way, and you can correct me if this doesn't align with the previous statements. If they can't feel that like overcoming of the obstacles in life or whatever, then do you see what's missing for me there?
Yeah. I see what you're saying, because on one hand, I'm saying, oh, not everybody gets an experience. Some people just have to slug it out, right?
And
then, right. But I think that assumes that there's not a blessing in living a life of faith. And so I think, there's lots of people who haven't had, when I say an experience, I'm talking about like, okay, Jesus appears to you, or God speaks in an audible voice, or you feel a certain feeling. So, but that doesn't mean that they're not experiencing God in ways that change their life. And so for some people, it is overcoming a sin that they struggle with. Maybe that's not, maybe, that's not what knowing God does for you. But
do you think it's possible that I'm experiencing God in a way that I'm like not interpreting as God, and he's okay with me not interpreting it as him?
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
I do.
Oh man.
If your life is getting better, I'd say you are experiencing God, because this is God is love. God is, everything good comes from him. So when you're experiencing all that is him.
God would be a hell of a poker player if he can pull these double bluffs like that. That's just impressive. You mentioned a second ago the phrase I think you used was the blessing of a life of faith. Is that the words that you? Can you say more about that? I'm curious what that means to you.
Well, I mean,
like faith.
Jesus,
I think a lot of people define
this is kind of like cliche because people talk about it so much, but it is pretty profound, I think. So I don't care if it's overused, but when Jesus appeared to his disciples, like before he appeared to Thomas, he appeared to some of his other disciples, and Thomas didn't believe. And Thomas said, "You know what? I can't believe you guys unless I actually see the nail marks in his hands." Mm-hmm. And so, Jesus then appeared to Thomas and said, "Thomas, stop doubting and believe. Look, here's my hands." And then Jesus said, "Blessed are you because you've seen, but blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed." Like, you've seen now. Okay, I'm messing up the quote, but basically Jesus is saying, blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. And I think it is a blessing to God. Like, he's the creator of all things. And it blesses him when we trust in him, when we believe in him, even when we haven't seen. And so, like, for me, I've never seen Jesus, but I believe in him. When I read the story of him dying on the cross, I believe. When I read the story of him appearing to his disciples, I believe. I haven't seen that. I can't prove that happened.
Right.
I have no evidence that all the people always ask me for. I don't have that. But you know what? I see the beauty of that person. I see the incredible thing that is written there, that my God, the creator of all things, served me in that way, that he loved me so much that he served me in that way. And I believe. And I think that is a treasure to God. That's a treasure to God, that I heard the story of what he did. And I saw it. I saw it for what it was. I saw it for what it was. I saw his love. I saw his beauty in that story, and I believe it. And now I'm living my life on that. I'm living my life by what God did for me. And so I have the opportunity. There's some things that we're not going to have when we're in God's kingdom. We're not going to have this opportunity that we have right now. There's certain things we're not going to be able to do there. Mm-hmm. When I get there, I'm going to see him face to face. I will never again have the opportunity to walk by faith. I will never again have the opportunity to live a life of worship and following him by faith. So I treasure that. I treasure this opportunity where when I don't see, I still follow. And I know God will treasure that for eternity.
I try really hard to pick very precise language so Please forgive me if I don't choose the right words here.
No problem.
All of that is, to me, very fluffy, and it sounds great. It sounds nice. It does. But I think I just can't bring myself to believe it on all fronts, right?
Yeah.
The personal experience part, which I think is what does it for most people. I don't want to say most. For a lot of people who do believe, that's what gets them there. The evidence for Jesus' resurrection. We don't know who wrote the God. All the stuff that you hear about all the time. I can't bring myself to think that it's true.
Yeah.
And so, where does that leave me if I can't have this life of faith? If I'm not a person who can walk by faith, I feel like I don't know where that leaves me. And actually, this is a question that I've always wanted to ask someone who thought differently than I. So, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
I've tried to answer this for myself, and I haven't been able to. Is there any other part of your life where you use faith besides belief in God? And this is not a gotcha question. I'm genuinely asking.
Yeah. I think I use faith every day.
Okay.
Because, I have faith in the people around me, right? I have faith in my husband. I have faith that, he's not running around on me. I have faith, that he is taking care of things. I have faith in, and so if you kind of equate faith with trust, and I would say it's a pretty good equivalent, right? So, we all have to trust in many things. I don't want to get controversial with people, but, I'm trusting the vaccine right now. I'm
Call the cops. Oh, no. Shut the stream down. It's over, y'all. It's over. I can't believe it.
I'm trusting that. That's an incredible amount of trust, right? Somebody is putting a needle in my arm with like some kind of goo, right? And I'm trusting that, first of all, it was manufactured properly. Second, that it was done, that what it is in that vial is actually what they say it is, right? They could be injecting me with who knows what, but all the way, I'm trusting that it's safe. I'm trusting that it was manufactured properly. I'm trusting this person who's going to stick the needle, that they're not going to do it wrong. It's, it's like, so there's and what option do you have sometimes, right? So we have to trust people. And we have to have, faith in things that we cannot prove, that we cannot see. And sometimes that's even trusting our life with people.
So in your eyes, it doesn't sound like there's really a major difference between the concept of faith and the concept of trust.
No.
Am I correct in hearing you say that?
Yeah.
Okay. I think about those differently. Right. So like if I were to have a reason to think something, if the girl that I'm not married, but the girl that I'm dating, if I don't think she's going to betray my trust or betray me, we'll say it that way, because I don't want to use it. If I don't think that she is going to betray me, is it that I have faith that she is not going to betray me, or do I trust that she is not going to betray me? I see those differently. If I trust that she is not, that means that I have reasons to think that that is the case.
Right.
Versus if I have faith, I think the only time that I hear the word faith is when there's a lack of that reason to trust. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, because you're talking about like vaccines, like there are demonstrable ways to show that, okay, yeah, like you can rely on this for the purpose that it is intended. You have however many scientists that do, and I'm not scientifical, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, you have the people that are doing the work. You have how many millions of people that have gotten it, and they didn't turn into Nazi zombies, and they didn't get a microchip that explodes their brain if they don't whatever. Yeah, I was told, that was another thing that I was told in my Christian school, was that the vaccine is the mark of the beast, and if you get it, you're not allowed into heaven, and they can deny you at the supermarket if you don't take the mark of the beast, and they can kill you on sight. Yeah. Anyway, so
wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. Living in the South happens. But yeah, I see trust and faith like so differently. And like the question of like, if I use faith in another part of my life, the way that I kind of define it,
Yeah.
I can't think of an area where I have to use faith, because if I were to have to use faith, then I wouldn't do the thing. Like the lottery is an example that I kind of thought of, where like I would use faith, or maybe something akin to faith, but at that point I wouldn't do it, because the chances of me winning the lottery are like slim to none. I actually have the reason that I wouldn't use faith there is because I have reasons not to trust, right? So like, I kind of see religions of the world, specifically Christianity, because that's the one that I've been exposed to my whole life. I kind of see it that way, where not only do I just not have a reason to think that it's going to work out for me that way, but I have good reasons to not believe that it's true. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What are your good reasons for not believing it's true?
Yeah. Personal experience would be one. If God is the way that he is described in the Bible, that doesn't line up with what I've experienced or what I've tried to experience. Divine hiddenness, kind of the same thing. And then the evidential problem of evil, not the emotional one that I think most people go for, but a loving, all-powerful God. If that being created at all, I think the whole of the creation that resulted wouldn't have the capacity for evil. So I take more of an evidential problem of evil rather than an emotional. But I didn't get into a lot of this because I know people get real bored by the, real technical, nerdy stuff. So I tried to keep it relatable and practical for, myself even to listen back, because I'm usually in the whole philosophical world in my own head about it. But
okay. Yeah, well, I guess I do think of faith and trust as sort of, similar things, because I don't think that we should have like blind faith. I don't think we should just have faith in anything. I have faith in Jesus because I have reasons to believe in Jesus. I have reasons to trust Jesus. So if I had reasons to doubt my husband's character, then I wouldn't have faith in him, right? I wouldn't trust him. Yeah. But I feel that I have reasons to trust. So,
and man, now that you say that, like, if you have your husband, right? And let's say, and knock on wood again, something happens to where your trust in him, I'm going to use the word trust instead of the word faith.
Okay, let's do it.
Your trust in him were to be reduced, depleted even. I could foresee that trust could be rebuilt, right? Like, have you ever lost trust in someone and then rebuilt it?
I'm sure that I have, but I'd have to think about it.
Okay. Like,
actually. Okay, I thought of an example. Yeah.
So it happened where you lost the trust, and then over time, or maybe even quickly, it was able to be rebuilt.
Yep. And I have no idea.
Without too many details, if you don't want to, can you maybe describe some of the things that allowed you to like rebuild the trust?
I would say like more experiences, like positive experiences. And also the willingness of the person to resolve conflict. Like, you know what I mean? Like where we like talked it out and then we went forward. There was like kind of an honesty there with like what had happened. And then we were able to like build new experiences. And like eventually like even the like kind of conflict resolution moment really helped. But then, we went forward building positive experiences, and that person became somebody that I really, really treasured and trusted. Yeah.
Again, you don't have to go into detail. The positive experiences. Can you maybe give me like an example of like one or two of what those might be?
Yeah, I would say like that it was somebody that I was serving with in Baltimore. And so we would be serving together, and she was just like we had like positive experiences together serving people, and I could see that she wasn't against me. And like we had talks, and like there were like words of affirmation and appreciation that were shown for each other.
Were the things that allowed you to build the trust back, were they things that you asked for, or was it things that you kind of mutually agreed, okay, maybe this is how we should proceed?
There was no plan. There wasn't a planned rebuilding of trust. It was just that, we kind of mutually apologized for the things that had happened in the past, and then we just went forward in kind of a different way.
Yeah. I guess the reason that I was so curious about that is because, like, in order for me to trust someone, and this kind of stems from the God thing when I was a kid, and my therapist gave me this incredible analogy for trust, right? Imagine there's an elementary school classroom, and there's a teacher, first day of class, she puts a jar on the desk and says, all right, when you little booger eaters are well behaved, some marbles are going to go in this jar. And when y'all are misbehaving, I'm going to take some marbles out. And then halfway up the marble jar, everybody gets a bag of candy and extra recess time. And then when the jar's full, we go on a field trip. So over time, you kind of trust people based off of like what they show you. It's like a healthy boundary thing that I've been learning in therapy and all that stuff. That's kind of the way that I view trust. And so my belief in God, the way that I equate those two is I had a jar that really wasn't that full ever to begin with. And these reasons to take marbles out of the jar keep coming. It's almost daily.
Yeah.
And the reasons to put marbles in kind of skimpy on the marbles. I don't know. Walmart was sold out, I guess, of marbles for my jar. And I guess that kind of goes back to like in my day-to-day life, if I'm experiencing a positive relationship or interaction with a stranger, or a song hits me in the heart in a real powerful way, or the sunrise is all nice, and if I'm not interpreting those things as God, those are small instances where I think marbles could go in the jar for God.
Yeah.
And if I'm not interpreting them as God, then I'm not building that trust. I'm not building that relationship that's so crucial to the whole idea of Christianity.
Yeah.
And I guess, like, I don't know, I wonder why it's so different for like you and I, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it is, probably has a lot to do with those marbles being yanked out of the jar at a young age, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I like how you put it, that those could be, those experiences that you're having could be marbles to go in the jar.
Sure.
Now, you said you're daily experiencing things that are making marbles come out of the jar. And you mentioned earlier that you might talk about your work and how that relates. Is that part of what is causing the marbles to come out?
It is. Yeah. So we were talking before. I work at a nonprofit that fights human trafficking. And on the daily, I hear stories from people who have been labor trafficked, sex trafficked, a mixture of the two. Some of them are foreign national. Some of them are domestic. Some of them are minors. A lot of them are minors. The average age when someone is forced into prostitution is 15. A lot of the work that I've done over the past, 3-ish years has been with young people that were incarcerated, young people that have been homeless, LGBTQ young people. And so, yeah, in my day-to-day, I hear these stories and I see these. And this happened last week. I was in, we do these things for our case management clients, where we kind of get to break bread with them a little bit and offer them some supportive services. And one of them said, I just thank Jesus for like where I'm at right now. And I would never say this ever in my life. I would never, ever say this. Right. But I thought this is the God's ratio. If you've ever heard of that, it's this concept of like, we thank God when we're in this great position or like this good thing has happened, but without all of this like abhorrent, just disgusting stuff, we wouldn't be where we are right now.
Right.
And like my question is always like, which one of those outweighs the other? When I see the harms that come as a result of the things that I'm experiencing at work versus the benefits, right? So like very practically, it's really difficult to get someone who's been trafficked into like a housing situation. It's really difficult for them to like overcome their traumas and like stop going back to their trafficker, relinquish or to allow addiction to relinquish its hold on them, to develop healthy boundaries and relationships that prevent them from being exploited again. A lot of them have criminal records, unfortunately, because of some of the things that are involved with the life. A lot of them are probably never going to have a healthy sex life again. Right. So there are like all these ways that they could be like recovering and healing, and it's a mountain. Each little thing that I just mentioned is a mountain that they have to climb. And I mean, a lot of the times, like I think us in the States, and you mentioned that you had gone overseas for a long time, so you might have had a different experience with this than I have. But we're really privileged in a lot of ways. We have access to decent healthcare. We have therapists, and we have, lots of technology and lots of stuff. So like, it's easier for people to get help, resources, things that they need when they're here. Easier. Not everyone does. A lot of people don't. But the same thing kind of goes for people in developing countries or countries that have been ravaged by wars. Those people probably say thank you to Jesus for what I can't even think, because those same people don't have clean drinking water.
Yeah.
Their family members are dying of starvation or just diseases, and children are being recruited into being child soldiers. There's it always gets brought up. Children have cancer. Like there's all these things that I look around, and I can't. What's the word? Rectify those things that just the things that I'm experiencing. Like there's a whole other world of suffering and like depths of just agony that like I can't even picture in my American mind. Yeah, and I guess it's more, and again, like I know that this is like people will cite this as like an emotional argument, so like you can't really, but like it's an evidential one too. It's an all-loving God, but it seems that suffering and pain and destruction is not the exception, it's the rule. And when someone has that recovery, that success story, that rags to riches type thing, that's like exceptional. That's rare.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I have a hard time rectifying that with an all good, all powerful God. The concept of a God that's maybe not all good, maybe not all powerful. Okay, yeah, like maybe you could get me there.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that it's been presented to me my whole life, I look around, ooh, like it seems day by day, like I said, marbles just being removed from the jar.
Yeah. I definitely understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you asked what Jesus came to save us from, and I'd say it's all the stuff that you just described. So, that's why, Jesus taught us to pray, Father, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, because God's will is not done on the earth. And so we're praying, may God's kingdom come and may God's will be done here. And so God's will is not being done. But there is a place where God's will is done, and that is God's kingdom. And that is what God is establishing through Jesus. And so, there is a place where none of this kind of stuff happens. And that is the place that God is trying to bring us all to.
Yeah. I think I said this earlier. If that was all true, then man, like that's what's up. Like that's sick. But I'm not sure. I think it's really cool. Something that I really like about some of the conversations that I've had. This is probably the best one that I've had intentionally with someone who of a different belief system than I. It's like we agree on a whole lot, and like we get to this point, we're like, yeah, we agree. Oh, I go here, you go here, and like I think that's good. I think that's okay. I know that a lot of the atheist religious conversations that I've observed in my own time have been kind of volatile, not been fun to listen to, unless you really like confrontation, which I kind of do, actually. So it's really refreshing to have a peaceful, non-aggressive discourse with someone on the other side of the fence, I guess.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've expressed everything you wanted to express, or is there more to talk about?
Oh, I could go for forever. Yeah, no, but I think this has been a great start. I would love to come back on and just pick up where we left off. This has been really cool. I've been thinking about like maybe starting my own YouTube channel. I just don't know how to. The technology part is just like way over my head. So I might message you later and just say, hey, like,
awesome.
How do I start this whole
thing?
Yeah,
it's easy. It's not hard.
Even like having like the people on the screen and then like coming back to you and you like respond and then like having them back on and then that kind of thing.
Well, that might be fancier than I do. I mean, I'm not doing any of that in this. So,
okay.
Yeah. But I mean, it's very easy. I can click and show just me or just you.
Oh, don't do that.
So, yeah. So it's not hard. Well, thank you so much for being on, Taylor. I really love what you're doing in life, and I love what you've shared. It's been a really beautiful conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you for letting me come on. This has been really cool. Like I said, I haven't really gotten the chance to talk with a lot of believers. I think they get like sketched out when I reach out to them and I'm like, hey, I'm an atheist. Do you want to talk about our beliefs? And they're like, no one does that. Leave me alone. But yeah, you were really cool about it. So thank you.
You're welcome. And thanks for everybody who's been here. We appreciate all your comments. I didn't get to respond to them, but God bless you guys and good night.